This is part 3 of our AC course, and in this one we're going to be discussing AC troubleshooting basics, the tooling you'll need, and how to diagnose and fix a problem. Hey guys, so this is the third installment of our AC class here, and this is going to be the final one. This is going to be basic troubleshooting for your AC system. Now, if you haven't seen the first and second videos in this series already, I recommend watching those first, and that'll help you understand the principles behind how the AC system works. Now, AC troubleshooting, there can be a lot of things that go wrong, but typically there's only usually a couple things that are the cause of an AC system not cooling properly. So I'm going to be going over that, and I had a truck, and I'm going to be using it as the example. If you've seen the second video, it's the one I was showing you the compressor and the condenser and the accumulator. It's that same truck, and the AC wasn't working on that. So I'm going to kind of go over what I found, and the things that I found were pretty much what's usually commonly the source of the problem on an AC system. So let's kind of get into that, and then we'll talk more about typical things to look for basic troubleshooting. This will kind of focus on you not using an AC machine. I will talk about the AC machine a little bit, but they're not something you're going to have usually unless you're actually in a shop. You know, if you're trying to do this yourself, you're probably just going to have a set of gauges and hopefully a vacuum pump, okay? So let's get into the video. So this truck had come into the shop, and it wasn't particularly hot this day, but they complained the AC wasn't blowing cold. So first thing I always do is put a thermometer in the vent, and sure enough, it was only blowing 80-degree air. Now the first thing I do whenever the AC is not blowing cold is I do a visual inspection. This is before I hook up gauges or anything. Is the serpentine belt there? I'm going to look at all the lines. I'm going to look at the condenser. Is the condenser damaged? And also what you're looking for is oil spots, but more particularly anywhere where dirt is sticking on any of the AC lines or any of the AC components. In the second video I talked about that there is oil in your refrigerant. And when there's a leak, some of that oil escapes with the refrigerant and it sticks to the hose or the fitting wherever it's leaking, and dirt will accumulate around where the leak is. So what we're going to be looking for is anywhere really that any oily dirt material is sticking to a hose or on a component. So if you've seen the second video, you already know where it's going to be, but look at that. So your accumulator here has some nasty oily dirt buildup around the fittings mostly, which means probably the O-rings are bad or the hoses. This hose here is pretty much coked with dirt along that fitting area there. So I went ahead and replaced that hose and the O-rings going to it, and also the O-rings going into the accumulator. Now here's where it gets tricky if you are trying to do this yourself and don't have an AC machine to recover the refrigerant. You're going to need at least a set of gauges and a vacuum pump to properly check this system, pull a vacuum on it after you've replaced any components. But what are you supposed to do about the refrigerant? If you don't have an AC machine, you can't really recover it. And it is illegal to just vent it to the atmosphere. Even though refrigerant is fairly cheap, it's considered an ozone depleting element. So you can't really just dump it out. If you crack the line, all the pressure is going to bleed out. So what we use is AC machines to recover it. Now, if the system is, let's say it has a big leak and all the refrigerant is out of it, well, at that point, you don't have to worry about recovering anything. So really, you'll just need your gauges and a vacuum pump of some sort. They're fairly cheap online. Now, whether you're using your AC machine or if you're using a set of gauges at a minimum, you're going to hook up to this system anytime you're changing a component. And the reason is to look for pressure. So this system, even though we verified that it has a leak, it has about 85 psi of pressure in the system still. So there's still refrigerant in there, but probably not the appropriate amount. So you're going to have to recover it in this case. So you would need an AC machine. Now, if you hook up and there's zero pressure, well, then you don't really have to worry about recovering it. but in this case, we do have to recover. Now, after I recovered it, it came up with basically 0.4 pounds of refrigerant in the system. Now, if you remember the sticker in the second video, this is how much refrigerant is supposed to be in. See the 2? There should be 2 full pounds of refrigerant in the system. So we found a leak. We found that the system's undercharged. We're now going to replace the components, charge it to the appropriate amount, and then go from there. Okay, so let's talk about the appropriate way to fill your AC system. Now, we have recovered this system we're looking at here, but let's assume you're in your garage and this is your own truck or this is your car and the system was empty. And you're going to want to recharge this system. So first you need to know the correct amount. And you can get a scale that will actually weigh. I'm assuming you're buying the 1 pound cans of refrigerant that they sell everywhere, you know, Walmart or AutoZone or whoever. And you're going to need a set of gauges and you're going to need a vacuum pump. Now, I know they sell the cans with the little hose that you hook to the low side port and you just fill it up. You don't want to do that. That's kind of like, you know, your engine's burning oil, so you just keep adding oil to it, but you never change the oil. If you have a leak and you know where the leak's at, after you fix the component, don't just stick the fill port on there and fill it up. You want to pull a vacuum on the system first. And I'll show you a picture of here. This is basically what you're going to need to refill your system and purge it of any air first. So this is a kit you can get on Amazon or anywhere really. It's about $100. It comes with the gauges and the pump. Now I can't say this is a great pump or a great set of gauges. You know, if this is something you're going to be doing quite commonly, you'll want to get, you know, probably some nice Robinair stuff. You can get a nicer pump, a nicer set of gauges, all aluminum. And they'll last you a lot longer and the heads are rebuildable and stuff. But if this is just something you're going to do for your own truck once, or maybe every couple years, or your truck and a buddy's truck, whatever, you know, this kit here will work. And, okay, so you find your leak. The system's empty because you hooked up your gauges and you verified. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to replace the component that was leaking, obviously, and any O-rings that go to it, because it'd be a bad idea to not replace the O-rings going to it. At which point then you're going to pull a vacuum on the system. And why are you going to do that? The reason you're going to pull a vacuum on the system is because if there was a big air leak or refrigerant leak and all of the refrigerant is out of the system, what's in the system? Air. And what's in air? Well, there's nitrogen and oxygen, but there's also water vapor. And if there's air in your system, that's going to prevent the correct amount of refrigerant being in your system because there's already a volume of gas in there. But also, you don't want water vapor in here. You have moving components in the compressor that if moisture gets in there, it can screw up the oil and it can also cause, you know, even though most of the components are aluminum, it can cause corrosion, a whole bunch of stuff. You don't want any moisture in there. That's why your accumulator is full of desiccant, because they don't want moisture in the system. So when you pull a vacuum in the system, hopefully it gets up to, you know, 28, 27 inches of water, inches of mercury vacuum. So what that's going to do is that's going to boil the water in the system. Because remember, water boils at, you know, room temperature about 70 degrees when under heavy vacuum. So if you're pulling a vacuum, you're going to suck out all the nitrogen, oxygen, all the air, and also pretty much all the water vapor that's in the system. The longer the vacuum, the better. But also what you're going to be doing by pulling a vacuum is you're checking for leaks before you put more refrigerant in there. So if you fixed a leak, or what you thought was the only leak, but the system won't pull a vacuum, let's say it only pulled 10 inches, you know there's another leak. So hopefully you could find that before dumping more refrigerant in there, and at which point it would just leak out, and then you got to put more refrigerant in. So that's why the vacuum pump is very important. Now, the set of gauges is a good idea to have because you can charge through the gauges as well, and you usually charge through the low side. So you'll just hook up your low side and your high side gauges. There's a center line, which is a yellow line, that will screw on to whatever AC canister you're using of R134A, at which point you'll want to dump, the appropriate amount of refrigerant into your system. Now, the problem is, how do you judge how much is going in? Well, you could use they have AC scales. You could even use like a kitchen scale or something. Because, if your system's rated for 1.5 pounds and you have two 1-pound cans, what's the right way to fill it? Well, it would be to fill one up and then halfway. But you really want to measure the weight, so you're getting as close to that number as possible. Okay, so we had fixed the leak by evacuating the system, replacing the component, pulling a vacuum on the system to verify no leaks. Then I recharged it with the appropriate amount of refrigerant. Turned the AC system on, still not working. So if you see here, if you look at the center of your compressor while your AC system's on, it should be spinning, but this one is not engaging. So I had to remove the compressor and take a look at it, and this is what I found. The clutch was actually broken, so it needed an AC compressor as well. Okay, so after replacing the AC compressor, which meant I had to evacuate the system again, pull a vacuum, check on it. We have our gauges hooked up here, and it's running, and you'll see the low side is pulling between 25 and 40 psi, and the high side is above static pressure, so the system's now working. Okay, so that system had multiple failures. It had a leak, the AC compressor wasn't working, and you could see there at the end that the pressures were operating in the ranges they should be. But with that, I always go by what's the vent temperature. Is it between 40 and 55 degrees, depending on the truck or car, coming out of the vents? If it's 45 degrees coming out of the vents on high, I'm happy. Now you got to watch too, what RPM range is it coming out of the vents at that range, because that affects the amount of refrigerant your compressor's pushing, things like that. Also the fan speed, not the vent fan speed, but the actual engine fan speed, because that controls the amount of air that goes over the condenser. Now if you got, your AC compressor's kicking in, it's cycling, and you got good vent temperature, I'd say that's a good repair. Now what's another problem that is pretty common on the AC system? So we had compressor failure and a leak. That's most of the problems really on AC systems. Well, there's electrical problems, and remember in video 2 we talked about switches. Well, there's usually a fuse that goes to the AC compressor. So the first thing is a good thing to check is the fuse blown? The fuse was not blown going to this compressor, but if the fuse is blown, that might mean you have a problem in that system, as well as the switches can fail as well. If they remain open, meaning they're not allowing current to flow to the compressor, that will create a problem because the compressor will never come on. It's pretty easy to bypass them just by putting a paper clip in the connectors to see if that switch is what's causing it not to cycle or not to kick on. That's pretty much most of the troubleshooting you'll need to know. On the electrical side, of course, you can do, resistance tests, voltage drop tests if you're familiar with electrical troubleshooting. And that's pretty much most of the troubleshooting you're going to know. This is basic troubleshooting. Like I said, this is about the equivalent of first day AC course. So, hope you enjoyed these videos. I'll be doing more classes in the future, and thank you for watching.